To That Fertility Show. Thank you for joining us last week on our debut show, The Live. It was great, and I think we got a lot of really good comments. So carry on with the comments. We'd like the comments. I'm going to introduce you to the co-hosts of That Fertility Show. Chris.
Hey everyone.
Jen.
Hi guys.
This week we are going to talk about cycles, as we've all had at least one cycle. We're going to talk through our different experiences when it comes to going through a cycle, hopefully to give you a little bit of information if you're yet to go through one, if you're midway through one, or just to give you a different idea of the different journeys people go through when they're trying to conceive through IVF. So, who wants to start? Shall I start and talk about mine? Or
Go for it.
Yeah? Okay, so if you remember from last week, I went through 2.5 cycles and resulted in a 7-month-old daughter. Not immediately. There was a smaller daughter, and then she has grown into a 7-month-old. That would be scary.
IVF has improved over the years.
So I went initially through NHS for our 1.5, and then it was all my wife. She did everything, and we ended up going privately to Spain to the Institute Bernabeu in Alicante. Which was great. We had a wonderful experience with the NHS, who did what they were meant to do, and they followed their process. And unfortunately for us, for our circumstances, that's just not ever going to result in a live birth. We went through an egg donation cycle, so it's slightly different to normal kind of IVF, what you think of IVF. So rather than all the hormones and stuff to try and build up a nice egg collection, that was a donor who did all that, and all Helen had to do was basically create a really nice feathered womb to receive. So there is kind of drugs and everything and preparations to do with that, but it's, I'm not going to say it's less intensive or anything like that. It's just a different avenue.
Can I just pick up on a few things that you said about the cycle? One, my wife did everything. I think we're going to cover about mental health down the line, aren't we? But
Yes.
there was more involvement from you, wasn't there, than your wife doing everything. Because we picked up on this, talked about this earlier, didn't we, about mental health, male mental health in particular.
Yeah.
This is your story. So
Yeah. It's one of those things, because we were both infertile. We both have our troubles. Me, as I said in last week's show, I have a low count and they're all stupid. So there's not many of them in the swimming circles. And one of the things talking about mental health as a coping mechanism for me is to really laugh about it, because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So
yeah, we found
Very
that.
true.
Yeah.
And so you develop a little bit of a dark humour around these kind of things, and I think part of it is being able to share that with your partner, and if they've got a similar sense of humour, then that takes a little bit of an edge off, and luckily, me and Helen, we kind of shared that. I think one of the things that kind of benefited us both is we're both very matter of fact. So we're both very open, honest, and take everything as it comes. So it was just the next step. We weren't trying to think too far ahead. It was just, here's our next step. So our next step when we went to Alicante was go visit the clinic. Let's just go visit the clinic. Let's not imagine what is going to happen in a year's time. Let's just go and have a look. And it was very much like some sort of weird Ex Machina sci-fi place. Lovely building, but everybody had a smile on their face and was very neatly turned out, and everything was this really nice polished wood and glass everywhere, and it felt very much like Ex Machina, which freaked me out. So that was one step, and we kind of got there. We enjoyed the company of everybody. Dr. Castilla was amazing. He was our consultant in Spain. Very kind of open with what a donor egg cycle would be, and very softly spoken, because I imagine he's gone through quite a lot of patients who maybe need that little bit of reassurance, and we were just like, yeah, skip that, come on, it's just, what's the nitty gritty? We initially was going to just kind of go out there for a day and come back, and I was like, do you know what, it costs the exact same, well, a little bit more, to stay 3 days. Let's go 3 days and let's spend a couple of days on the beach. That is really important later on. So we did that. We had a couple of days in Playa de San Juan, which is outside Alicante, beautiful place. Nobody speaks English. It's just one of the best resorts in the world I've been to. Everybody's Spanish or German, and with no language skills whatsoever, other than a little bit of GCSE German. We managed to have a couple of days and a couple of calzones. It was great. And I think that's really important, is finding, it's a difficult thing to find enjoyment within, but to find something to enjoy about the journey is important to me.
I know, as we're going, Jen's going to talk from her perspective and me from the male, but I think you've got to, there's a unique element of your cycles in terms of a cycle with your own eggs and sperm and then donor eggs. How mentally did that feel, the difference between the two cycles, particularly using donor eggs?
Initially, when we had our very first consultation with Dr. Beckett, when we were first going through IVF, her recommendation was donor eggs from day one. She says, we will go through, because you're entitled to it, you're entitled to an IVF cycle on the NHS, but you will benefit from your age, from your hormone results, from a donor egg. And initially we were like, well, okay, that's not something we're going to think about, because the thing right in front of us is our NHS cycle. When it came to that failed cycle and the phone call, which I will never forget the phone call we got when the nurse rang and said, you're not pregnant. I videoed everything in that journey, hoping to put together a nice little kind of thing to show our child when they're 18, and I videoed this conversation, and I've never watched it. It's sat on my phone, it's taken up 1.5 gigs of it, and I won't delete it, but I'll never watch it, because it's horrendous to think about it. So when it came to the realisation that, you know what, we're never going to get pregnant, either with my sperm or with Helen's eggs, or a combination of, my wife's initial kind of gut reaction was, well, let's just get a donor embryo. Let's not use either of our stuff. And I can really understand it. I can understand, well, if I'm not good enough, then you're going to come along with that journey with me. We're going to share this. And honestly, I was really, really upset by that. And I kind of thought, well, it should at least be 50% from us, you know? And I don't think we've ever talked about this, so exclusive. And I think very quickly, though, she changed her mind. It was like, do you know what, let's just take the donor egg, let's use your sperm. And, you know, Helen kind of was really looking forward to carrying the baby. And I think there's a lot which kind of goes into that gestation period and that pregnancy period, which the mother can influence. So I think she came around to the idea that that would be a very positive thing, and that would be her contribution, would be the vast majority of the work in creating this life. But it's that initial knee-jerk reaction of, not my eggs, or not my sperm. It's so hard to get over the ego, and I think that was a big thing for us, is ego never comes into it. It's the end result. It's the, I want to be a parent, I want to be pregnant, I want this, rather than I want it to be 100% ours. I want it to be my eggs or my sperm. I think we very quickly got over that and understood, you know, the percentages were in our favour if we went donor egg. So yeah, so once we got into Spain, and the clinic we ended up using, Institute Burnabout, are kind of one of the best in Spain. Spain is, in my opinion, one of the best countries in terms of fertility, science and research. They're so on trying to develop new techniques, trying to push that science forward. Something which I think the NHS would love to do, and without getting political, are pretty much bound to not be able to do that. As a country of origin for IVF, it feels very sad that we have to look outside of our NHS for these kind of treatments. But, you know, the clinic we had, like I said, were amazing. We ended up going out there 3 times. So we went first time for a look around, second time where I had all my sperm tests, and we were then going to start talking about the donor and what we were looking for within that donor. I make that sound like we get to choose and there's a big catalogue. You flick through and go, well, I'm that one. It really isn't. They try and match them so close to my wife. So it was height, eye colour, skin tone. And you'd think going to Spain we're going to end up with a very Spanish-looking child with dark hair and a nice olive skin. And we really haven't. They've gone for somebody like my wife who's got dark hair, but he's quite pale. So that's what they were looking for. They didn't want us to have a baby who people would look at and go, that's not their baby or anything like that. So they were really, really good at that. And then we had a test for my genetics to make sure there was no chance that my donor and me would end up with some sort of genetic disease, which cost us a little bit more. Not a great deal more, it was like 1,500 quid, which on the grand scheme of things isn't a lot to have that little bit of reassurance that our baby is going to be free from those kind of worries. I mean, it wouldn't account for things like Down syndrome or anything like that, but it would be for those kind of genetic defects like liver failures and all those kind of stuff.
Do you ever do that with cost now? When you buy something, you compare it to an injection. Oh, that's an injection.
Basically, if it's 100 and something, not 1,000 or something, you go, oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, massively so.
It's crazy. I mean, God bless credit cards. So yeah, so that was that, and where the third time we went was the business. So we went for a week, 10 days, because we just thought, let's just have 10 days. And our kind of day was going to be slap bang in the middle. So we'd have so many days to kind of build up to it, and then so many days afterwards. On the Friday was egg collection from our donor, and they rang us up and said, we've got 11 eggs. We were like, fantastic, because we could only ever get a couple, basically, through Merlin. So we were like, that's amazing. And then we're like, we estimate 6 and 8 fertilised. Great. Next day, phone call. Yeah, we had 11, 2 were fertilised. And we'd been there before, when we were told, oh, we could only get 2 eggs, only 1 fertilised, and this cycle hasn't worked. And it just felt so deflated.
Did you feel the pressure? Sorry to interrupt, but did you feel the pressure then because you'd kind of almost initially pushed for your sperm to be used rather than just doing the donor embryo? Did you at any point kind of go, was that the wrong call?
Yeah, absolutely, because we were both having fertility issues, and with ICSI, I was kind of safe in the assumption that it's not going to depend on my sperm swimming and entering and doing all that kind of stuff. It would be done for it. So I was a little bit kind of pressure's off.
Yeah.
If they pick a good one, we're all right. But there's still that 10% of if they pick a bad one, it's still going to fail. So there was a little bit of me who was like, and to be honest, out of those 11, 9 of them failed. 9 of them were probably all down to me. And the 2 that they probably just looked in and found the 2 good ones. But again, it was that idea of kind of, right, well, that's the information we've got in front of us. That's what we've got to work with. It's pointless thinking about those 9 now.
Yeah.
We have 2. So go see Dr. Castillo on the Monday. We'll see what he has to suggest. Which we did. So we went around, and it's difficult because you don't want to think about it. You don't want to dwell on it. You don't want to feel, you're in this amazing, Alicante is an amazing city. You think of it as just the airport for Benidorm, and it really isn't. It's this amazing medieval city. Try the ice cream; it's amazing. I'm rambling. So Monday we go see. I'm skipping. Monday we go see Dr. Castillo, and it's about 12 o'clock. We were told for the transfer, don't wear suntan lotion, don't do this, that, and the other, don't wear perfume and stuff. So we rocked up as if we'd just been down on the beach. So suntan lotion and a lot. And we're walking across the thing, and I'm tooting on my little tutor, and I didn't hear them say, we're going to try for a transfer. So we get into the office, and Dr. Castillo's like, yeah, we're going to try for a transfer. And I was floored, pretty much. And just kind of, oh, right, not expecting it whatsoever, unprepared completely. And he basically said, transfer today, we'll put 2 in, or you can wait till Wednesday when it was the 5 days, because the don't like to transfer before 5 days.
No, and our second one was 3-day transfer as well.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
And so this would have been a 3-day transfer on both of them. And we had this kind of really quick conversation because he was like, if we're going to do it, you've got 20 minutes to have this conversation. And I was like, just give me the numbers. You know, as somebody who's worked as a business analyst, numbers make sense. So I was like, give me the percentages. And he's like, do it one on Wednesday, 50%. You're pregnant, or you're not. Today, 60. Let's go today. So 10 minutes, we're on a trolley in a waiting room, waiting to go into theatre. 2 went in, and it's so very quickly. The difference in we had our first transfer. They have huge, massive machines and pipes going from the laboratory into the operating thing, and there's the doctor there, and you can see it on the screen, and there's a big close-up of the embryo. In this woman came in with a little petri dish and a syringe and walked from the lab, which was right at the other end of the corridor, all the way down, past loads of people, just, excuse me, blah, blah, blah. And unreal. It's unreal, that kind of difference in, you know, they were so relaxed with it. And it was, she could have tripped, fallen, and that would have been it. But
2 went in.
One
came out.
One came out. Yeah.
9 months later.
Yeah. So that was it. And we're kind of, the big thing which I was going to come back to was, I think the real benefit was the 5 days after, where we could go and enjoy a few days in the sun. Too many times when you have the transfer and stuff, it's work the next day, or it's, you know, I've got to do X, Y, Z the next day, and you're back to your normal life. And I honestly believe those 5 days we had were the making of that pregnancy, and they're the things which made the difference. Obviously, I'm not crediting the entire thing to that. Obviously, there's a lot of work done by the professionals, but that was the winning factor for me. That was that extra 5% which meant success. So that's my really long story about
I think
cycle.
it's a great story. I think it's great to share this because actually I have never done that process. So now I feel like, having listened to you, I feel like I would understand it a little bit more and what to expect and the pros and cons a little bit, actually.
But your process from a female point of view then...
Yeah, very different.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, female point of view, that's not right. A male point of view is still a female point of view. You're trying to, you know, but you guys, you do have a very different role in the process. So I guess what you're trying to say is that we're the ones literally having it put in us. Yeah.
And so your work is kind of done in the lab, and we're almost like trying to grow what's created by science in a way. So,
yeah.
I mean, there are different perspectives, and I think that's, you know, saying last show, I think that's really great having you two guys here to talk about this, because actually hearing that from your perspective, if your wife sat here and told us the story, it might be a similar version but with different things that stood out for her, actually. And I think whenever, if you have 2 men or 2 women talking about the same viewpoint, the same thing happened, but the perspective of it and the way that you handle it and talk about it is actually going to be very different anyway. And I think actually the way a male views IVF can be sometimes like you do, to underplay your role in it and to make the humour in it, whereas sometimes the woman is just so, the pressure of, you know, I've got to try and grow and nurture this embryo. I think it does give you that different viewpoint, actually. So
there's certainly like a yin and yang to that, where because men kind of feel their work is done in the cupboard.
Was it literally a cupboard there, or did they have a nice suite?
It was a cupboard with a nice couch and a big flat screen telly.
Nice.
So mine was a room with a clear window overlooking London.
Oh, I mean, there's whatever floats your boat.
Not only could I overlook London, but London could overlook me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's one for the exhibitionists.
Yeah, I was always wondering, you know, how that felt. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many jokes.
Oh, we've had them.
Let's do a little reel of those, couldn't we?
Jen, on to your cycle. Anyway.
Yeah, so very different. As I say, ours was based in the UK with my eggs, my husband's sperm, and we've done 3 rounds on the NHS based in Oxford at the Oxford Fertility Centre, and we have a satellite clinic, so we're not having to constantly travel all the way to Oxford where I live, but it's a very clinical process, as you'd expect, and actually the first 2 rounds we went through, I hadn't really reached out to anybody. I didn't know what to expect. And so it was quite an intimidating thing to have that first consultation in Cheltenham and be told, you know, you're going to be going here, having this scan, doing this. And it felt like just information overload, actually, in that very first meeting. And I think what I'd like everyone to know who hasn't yet gone through it is actually, don't worry. That is just, and everyone will feel that. Everyone will feel a bit like, what have I got into? What is this? You then, in my clinic, you then have an appointment with the nurses where you have the planning for what you're going to be doing and when your cycle is going to start. And they give you a day-by-day breakdown of what to expect before you start a cycle. And as I say, this was with my own eggs, my husband's sperm. So for us, we had to call in the clinic on our day 1 of cycle. We started medications, which were injections. There are different types of medication that you can inject with. I started on Gonal-F, which is in Oxford is the basic stimulator.
In the UK, it's the typical one to give, isn't it?
It seems to be, and unfortunately I think that probably is to do with price rather than anything else and availability. But it does seem to be the standard. And because of my age and my low AMH levels, I was putting the maximum dose of 375 mils. Which was maximum for our clinic, just to clarify. That might be different elsewhere.
And just AMH for those new?
AMH is basically the number of, it's an anti-Müllerian hormone, but it's the number of follicles you've got left in your body, number of eggs you've got left in your body, and they do that on a blood test, which some clinics will do in-house. Ours was £30. I think we sent it off to London to be analysed. And you're looking for a lot higher than mine was. I think the average for my age is about 50 and I was down in 5. It was that kind of, I was functioning about 10% of what I should be for my age. But that will be different depending what age you are and everything like that, but they will check for you and they will make sure that you know if that's a good level for you. So once all that's been done, we then had our first egg collection and we produced 9 eggs. Sorry, the first one was 12 eggs actually, beg your pardon. 9 of them were useful eggs. We ended up, after they'd run them through to 5 days, with 3 viable embryos. We weren't sure at that stage if we were going to record in for the 3-day transfer or the 5-day. Oxford have since now stopped doing a 3-day transfer. It's not an option. You can only do a 5-day transfer there now because they think the chances of success are much higher on the 5 days. And they also believe it stops unnecessary heartache. So if an embryo stops developing between day 3 and day 5, you don't have that 2 weeks of waiting to know.
Yeah.
But then obviously you can have a 3-day transfer and it can be a success. So it's kind of it's a hard one to know really, like what would be right.
It's one of those where I think clinics are starting, especially over here, are doing those small percentages. So the small percentage increase of a success at 5 days rather than 3 means that they're not wasting resource on 3.
Yeah.
It means that they're funneling those little dollars they have
into the correct.
There is a mindset around that, isn't there? Yeah, I know we had to talk about this. So our second one was 3 days, and our third one, weirdly, they said you're going to do 3 days. So we left Rotherham and we drove down to London and we got to Milton Keynes when they go, actually, we've changed our mind, it's going to be 5 days. Turn around, drive home.
Thanks for that.
But we had that thought, if they're going to fail, at least put them in to give the body a chance.
Yeah.
So we did have that in mind.
It's hard, isn't it? I mean, you could sit there and discuss the benefits and the advantages, disadvantages of it, couldn't you? But from our non-medical background, I mean, I guess you just believe what you're told by your clinic, don't you?
Yeah.
And I think that's why this show is really important because it gives people the chance to go and ask elsewhere. Don't just take your clinic's word for it.
We're not,
get a second opinion and things,
We're not saying disagree with the clinic.
No,
for
don't just go in and start around.
Yeah, you're wrong. But just know that there are other approaches and just sort of do your research yourself and look into things and do feel free to get a second opinion. I think when you're told things, just if you're not sure, if something doesn't sit well, I just sort of took it and went, I don't know if that's right, I don't know. I wish I'd just actually gone to somebody and said, is there a different way of doing this? Do you actually think this is the best way? Because every clinic will have a different procedure, different process. As I say, I was on the Gonal-F maximum dose, having done the down reg. I mean, the down reg, I could do a whole show on the down reg. It's a bit of IVF that isn't normally mentioned. It's really exciting. So you do normally just talk about the stimulant and the injections and how to boost your eggs. A lot of people will do the long protocol of a down regulation, which is often in the form of a nasal spray, which is the one I had, and it sends you into menopause, which is
so this is the one that turns off.
It turns off everything.
Yeah.
It stops your brain communicating with your lady bits, basically.
And it gives you a certain amount of months before you return it back on again.
Yeah, weeks,
weeks,
depending how
sorry.
you respond. And the idea is that you have a down-regulation bleed, which in my case went on for about 20 days, which is lovely. So it's basically having a period, and it empties everything, and you're in zero, and then you start the stims, which I tend not to talk about the down-reg because I get really cross about it because it makes me angry and menopausal and all hot flushes and all that. So once we'd done all the stims and we got ourselves and we'd scanned and we got our eggs and we got the call, we then, at my age, were given the option of choosing whether we had 1 or 2 per TIM. Most of the time the clinic will only put 1 in on the NHS, but if you're older, and depending on the quality, in our clinic, we got the choice. And we literally had 1 minute to make that choice. I'm lying on the couch, legs akimbo, ready for transfer, and they're going, we're putting 1 or 2 in. So the other thing I'd say is,
And
like,
are you
have this in
under
your mind.
some sort of sedation at this point as well?
Not for the transfer. For
No.
collection I was,
Right.
but for the transfer, no, I just go in. I think some people do have a mild something if they have problems with the equipment, but I was fine. So I'm wide awake and good to go with it. So, but we literally had 1 minute to make the decision of 1 or 2, and we were told that one of ours was a top grade embryo and the other 2 were not great. So we went, we'll just put that one good one in. But it's always a good idea actually to have that conversation beforehand. You know, because you don't ever think that's your choice.
Yeah.
You never sit there and go, oh, I'm going to have to choose whether it's 1 or 2 and know all the risks and the potentials but we heard a bit like you saying about the 60% chance against a 50%. We were told it was an extra 10% chance to have 2 put in, but we're like, but if they're not very good, are we better
But that
putting
breaks
1?
down at each embryo being 30%. So it's not a 60% overall, kind of 10% better than a 5. It's a 30%.
Right.
Which,
Yeah, I was going to say we got told.
yeah. Which I was still quite happy with.
Yeah.
It's still a 10% increase.
Yeah.
Carry on. Go. Sorry.
No, sorry.
But I mean that was our first round really, and I think we then did get the 2 frozen ones, and a frozen cycle is different. But I won't go on about too much about that now because I think actually a frozen cycle is a different beast really.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later.
And we'll talk about that later on. But that was my experience of my first cycle. But the main thing I'd say is do read, do talk beforehand. Don't just turn up and be bombarded like I was really. I think just prepare yourself a bit.
So on ours, our third round, we went to, as in London, which is basically, where it's like a boot camp, basically. They call
They
it,
say, don't they?
yeah, they call it the
Boot camp.
IVF boot camp centre, the way it is. And so our stims was changed every day. We had to phone in, have a blood test in the morning, phone up at 1 o'clock and get details about what stims we were going to take that day.
Wow,
So
detailed.
stims constantly changed. So it really was a boot camp, and we had to stay in London for like literally a month. But we're talking about the eggs, 1 or 2. We had that conversation every day along the process.
Wow.
So when the eggs got fertilised, day 1 to day 5, constantly, right, there's this many, okay, 1.
And that was the clinic prompting the discussion.
Yeah, now you got to day 3, right, we're thinking about, putting them in. There's 2 ahead. Do you want to put those in, or do you want just still, just 1 to 1? And we constantly communicated and updated to day 5. Even day 5, we had like an hour in which to decide. We already knew, but to really confirm our ideas and be 100% sure. So we
So
were
you're much better informed actually than I was, just rocking up going like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
You were given that advice by the clinic, which is nice.
And that feels like that's a very unique experience compared to my experience and others around who talking to her. There is very much that kind of idea of on the day, 1 or 2, or you're not even given that choice.
No.
So that feels, and this is kind of the stuff which, when I look at clinics abroad, they're kind of doing, is they're doing those kind of really detailed day by day. Kind of
It seems more of a
easy or-
standard process. doesn't
Yeah,
it?
and I think they're more willing to kind of put that level of science in, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
But I think that's
Which
the
is
main
great.
thing, isn't it? Is that every cycle in every clinic can potentially be different.
Okay.
And so don't take our word for it on any of it. You might turn up and you might have a very different experience. But
In fact, sometimes it's just asking about
Yeah.
the questions that you need to ask, saying to your doctor, what should I be knowing?
yeah.
What do I need to know?
And that's definitely something that we'll try and get consultants in, won't we, to actually give advice that they're medically qualified to do that we can't do. We can just talk about our own experiences, but I think over the coming months we'll be trying to get people in who can actually answer your questions and can actually provide you with a more definitive response to things. So
And if there's anything which you in particular want us to cover, stick it in the comments. remember as well, like and subscribe so that when you do stick in the comments, we'll preferably look at your comment if you've liked and subscribed.
He's joking, though.
I'm not. So, any more?
No, I think we're out of time for this week, aren't we? I think the main thing to note is the difference between abroad, the UK, and
clinic to clinic.
Yeah, clinic to clinic.
Yeah.
You know, NHS to where you went in Oxford to the boot camp we went to, and I'm glad we went there. I really am. It was amazing. It was just really intense. The difference of clinic is key, isn't it? It's massive.
And don't be afraid to shop around and find the place that feels right to you.
Exactly. I mean, we looked at lots and lots of clinics, lots in the UK, and we ended up going to Institute Bernabeu in Spain.
Yeah.
Worked for us, might not be brilliant for you, but it is understanding your own issues with fertility and then matching that to the clinic. I think that's the key.
We even went back to the GP occasionally and got them as a second opinion. You know.
I think that's it. So honestly, use the resources that are around you.
Yeah.
So, that is the end of our pre-recorded show. Thank you very much for watching. Like I said, do like and subscribe. It helps us out quite a lot. Leave us a comment of anything you want us to cover in the future, and we'll see you on our next live, which will be
2 weeks.
2 weeks
time.
Yeah, 2
2
weeks
weeks
time.
time.
So, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.